So welcome to today's webinar called Take Control by Letting Go with Windows AutoPilot. My name is Heinrich Pelzer. I'm part of the sort of solutions consultancy team here at PowerON. My background is around Windows deployments as well as System Center. Been doing this for about 10 years now. I'd like to think I've got a pragmatic and hands-on approach wherever possible. Some would beg to differ. To kind of get in touch, I'm on Twitter at Heinrich_Pelzer, as well as my email address on screen there, which is heinrich.pelzer@poweronplatforms.com. So a little bit about PowerON Platforms. We're a Microsoft Gold partner as well as a EMS Elite partner, which gives us very nice inroads to the product team with Microsoft. We're not a single platform player by any stretch. We kind of focus on what we're good at. That in itself is Azure, OMS, EMS, System Center, the entire stack, as well as Windows 10. We've also developed some products to kind of help our sort of clients drive towards their business goals. Look out for some webinars on these, by the way. They're sort of up and coming soon anyway, especially around Pulse DMS. So Pulse DMS is our sort of device and management and security platform, which utilizes both Configuration Manager and Azure to kind of give that cloud down approach with regards to kind of that full end-to-end desktop management piece, as well as Pulse OM, Operations Manager, which is a monitoring platform, as well as Camino, which allows us to kind of stand up services rapidly for our clients. So today's agenda, fairly straightforward. I hope it's going to be very informative. So we'll start with an introduction as to Windows AutoPilot and why it really matters, as well as who should be using it and when, looking at where we can kind of fit in some of these personal touches around customizations from an adoption point of view, as well as applications and security considerations. Some food for thought towards the tail end of this to kind of put a different spin on it, as well as kind of looking at, natural as you would expect, questions and answers. As with any new cloud service that comes on board these days, it's a case of asking yourself one question, and that is, does it matter? Is this something that, I should be paying attention to as either a manager, as an infrastructure guy, or even a guy on the ground kind of delivering Windows specifically, all right? Now, with this, the idea is very, very simple. It's about reducing complexity of your current operating system deployments and reducing the amount of time taken to get things ready. Now, that in itself should be kind of, something that rings true for a lot of IT professionals these days. And that is, it's actually helping me with the most important thing I have, and that is time. That's the most important asset you possess as an individual, as an organization, as well as a department more than anything, is time. So if we can kind of get something in place that's made for Windows 10, it's future ready, it's been developed in the cloud, it's very easy to use, it's cloud centric, but it extends functionality down onto my on-premise infrastructure. This to me ticks all the boxes of something that matters. And that is to kind of help us drive change. Now, 9 times out of 10, we all kind of hear this, we see it, we kind of read it everywhere. Sort of winds of change are always coming. They're always kind of something that's present. All right. Now, what have we been seeing in the sort of industry as well as the kind of IT department space, right, of change? We've gone from one device to many devices. Okay, and the reason for that is we've gone from business-owned devices to I can bring my own device in these days. That BYOD strategy is in place. Applications have also changed, all right? Sort of gone are the days of logging onto a terminal server these days, and we're looking at maybe adopting a SaaS platform wherever we can. We've gone from manual to automated deployments of stuff, not just services, but also applications. All right, we've kind of made things available to end users these days, and that process of them adopting it is automatic. They can just log on, they can just click a box, and they can click install, and away they go. So which kind of drives us towards this proactive approach to IT. We can make things ready in the assumption these days that end users or people will be adopting them. All right, now this high touch thing or high effort should be something, as I said, is driving more towards a sort of self-service road. Now, that's not just necessarily for onboarding applications or services, but it's also getting on board with the new operating system overall. So one thing with regards to Windows AutoPilot is kind of discussing, who should be using this and when. All right, so we've been having this discussion not just internally amongst the guys, but also with clients. So, does it matter if I have this traditional OS image that I kind of need to provision, and kind of need to put through the mill and kind of get onto Windows machines? The answer is no. It doesn't matter if you have that because it's not kind of related to that. It's that onboarding experience that we're talking about. All right. What about if I have a kind of modern approach? I want to kind of, look at, sort of reducing that complexity as we spoke about. Where does that fit in? Can I use AutoPilot for that? Absolutely. There's nothing stopping us, with regards to rolling a device in with Intune, having the Windows AutoPilot experience be part of that, and away we go. With regards to procurement, Do I have this constant need to put my own sort of custom image onto it, right? Is my OEM image good enough? Sometimes it is, all right? It depends on who you buy them for. We're not here to kind of make jokes. We all know who the hardware vendors are we enjoy the most and who we dislike the most with regards to that, with that bloatware perspective, all right? How do we manage that? Okay, how do we kind of take the pain away from, using something without kind of doing too much with it? Is it good enough for us, right? It's that kind of thing. If we're going to let perfection get in the way of good enough, especially from an OS specific perspective, okay? We're not sort of trying to get around security here, all right? We're just looking at the operating system itself. All right, what about my identity? As I said, functionality from the cloud is extending down with something like Windows AutoPilot, all right? So we can still look at kind of having that onboarding or that logging on of both sort of standard Active Directory as well as kind of looking at Azure Active Directory. All right, so Office 365 guys or guys who already got a footprint in Azure, you can have the best of both worlds here, okay? You can look at either doing Azure Active Directory join for those end users out in the wild who you kind of just need to get up and running pretty quickly. You've got a good overview of what they're doing, as well as, those guys who kind of need to have things a little bit more sort of central these days. Moving on from there, these two tie up sort of together, software updates as well as sort of software applications. The point is that I need to get software from point A to point B. Can I still be quite granular in the way I do my patch management? Yes, you can. Can I use Windows Update for Business? Yes, you can. Okay, can we look at, the sort of applications we push down, whether they're Win32 apps or whether it's, sort of a more of additional sort of, a sort of more modern SaaS application? The answer is yes again. We could use Windows Store for Business to put things in place to make sure that I can go there and get my line of business application, my SaaS app, as well as looking at kind of getting my web application. Beyond that as well, we can look at the management platforms. You'll see there that it says MDM. It doesn't say Intune. It's not specific to Intune. Intune has no real dependency on being used here. You can use your mobile irons if you wish to kind of manage Windows 10, as well as looking at incorporating Configuration Manager here as well. And that's something, as I said earlier, food for thought. That's sort of something that's worth thinking about later on in some of the other sort of up-and-coming PowerON webinars, by the way. Another thing as well is my security. My settings. All right. 9 times out of 10, we're either looking at doing a couple of things when it gets to group policy. We're either kind of restricting something or enabling something. All right. Or we're hiding something. Now, can I accomplish the goal for this particular either team or block of end users I'm targeting with sort of standard MDM policies, or are they group policy specific? Now, as I said, with that functionality coming down, we can make the assumption here that group policy applies, as well as looking at, is group policy necessary in every single scenario? All right. Can I kind of look at things from a different angle? Can I use native Windows Intune in this instance anyway? Can I use native MDM policies? All right. Can I look at, for example, using some policy CSP that's very good with Windows 10 these days? So driving change is kind of, I would expect, a sort of common theme with kind of anything we look at these days from the cloud, right? It's designed to change things. So what were we used to? What has changed here? So to kind of give you an example of how that's being driven and what that means in the Windows 10 world, is a kind of reflecting on the past here. All right, when it gets to getting Windows 10 ready, or let's pretend just any operating system ready, what did we need as part of that? Right, we needed the OS files, we needed language packs, Windows updates, applications, and drivers. Now, that's not in any kind of configuration yet. That's just itself in its raw form. All right. Beyond that, we now need to kind of get those things ready. All right. And typically speaking, if we're going to do a build and capture to get an operating system ready, the likelihood is we'd use something like MDT. We'd create a sort of custom task sequence to kind of do the build and capture phases, as well as looking, at any particular boot images we need to get ready. But as you would expect, this in itself is quite time intensive. We then have to update those deployment shares with our source files, with our images, with our boot WIMs, with our task sequences. Moving on from there, we'd have to transfer those down onto our VM, best practices, hats on guys, all right, with our VM, as well as looking at then running that build and capture task sequence, all right, to kind of make sure that we're grabbing all the goodies we want and pulling off exactly what we need, installing our updates and our applications, all right, and then kind of repeating this process to some extent. So we're going to send that captured WIM back to our MDT server. We should be checking it, best practice hat on again. We'll be doing some blank test deployments, which again takes some time. Following it from that, once we're happy, we'll create a new task sequence with our captured WIM, language packs, applications, and drivers, ready to kind of, again, update those deployment shares with our source files. Our golden WIM is ready, got our boot images ready, we've tested our drivers, our new task sequence is also ready, and then bang, we can deploy Windows. Now, we all as sort of IT pros know that this in itself isn't an afternoon's work, all right? This can take some time depending on how complex it needs to be. The idea with Windows AutoPilot is throwing that notion out of the window completely, all right? Now, how does this differ? So if you are sort of someone who's still looking at procuring your hardware, other hardware vendors will kind of, I suppose, be onboarded later on, but there's a good list of them now, you know, especially if you're kind of purchasing new ones. Microsoft Surface is the kind of best one to use in this example. So if we were to purchase some Surfaces, we would get the device IDs from our hardware vendor. In this instance is Microsoft. Our IT guy will then upload them into the Windows AutoPilot service. What that really means is it's a hardware hash. There's a serial number, that long hardware hash, as well as some other bits and pieces relevant to the hardware that's uploaded into that service, which means that once you log on, effectively, once there's an internet connection and that hardware is then seen by the internet or the Windows AutoPilot service, you know, it will kind of help you with that onboarding experience. Following on from that, your kind of IT guys will then configure something called a Windows AutoPilot profile. It's very sort of simple still. It's something that, as you would expect, would be growing. And then from there, we can kind of have this self-deploy mechanism in place, all right, where there's no real kind of like this laptop is for an individual, a specific individual. We can get many devices ready for many users, right? So that your onboarding process is then happening basically on logon, effectively, with either an Office 365 or an Azure Active Directory account, which then enables us to do this. We can then slide this over the desk, all right, or kind of deliver this through, you know, the Royal Mail. This is what I'd be expecting if I was a Windows AutoPilot sort of customer. It's just this box. I open it up, and what does that look like? So we'll just wait for our device to boot up. First thing we'll do is we'll select that we're in the United Kingdom. Following on from that, our label, sort of keyboard layout will be United Kingdom again. We'll skip this. And there we go. We're presented with the Windows AutoPilot onboarding experience. This in itself is just default directory information, by the way, guys. You know, if you're looking at kind of customizing this, it'll just be whatever is in there, and it's picked up on the sort of standard company branding. So if we go ahead and use our Azure Active Directory credentials, I'll just turn that into an @ Click next. Type in our password. Our device is now being set up. And we're presented with, you know, our favorite screen of all as IT guys. And this in itself will just be running through some bits now, enrolling the device into Intune, and getting some bits and pieces ready for us to use once we're ready to go. And we'll just wait for this to finish. And we're done. That's very quick. So as you would expect, this in itself is being running with Intune. So first things first is we're going to need to set up a pin because we've configured Windows Hello for this. Fingers crossed, this should go straight through pretty quick. I should get a text message. There we go. Let me just type that in. 909, sorry. 687, 6, 8, and a 7. Away we go. We can now set up our new pin. Click OK. We should be all set. And there we have it. So there you go. We've logged on. So this service, not perfect. We can see here that, you know, it still looks very sort of generic. And my virtual machine hasn't really got a lot going for it. I've got a very sort of standard bleak start menu. I've got, you know, no real background. Everything in itself will just be rolling. So what we'll do is we'll just give this some time to kind of catch up to the rest of it. And we'll give it a quick reboot. as I go through this presentation, and we'll see what that looks like in a couple of minutes. So whilst that virtual machine is doing its thing, we can have a quick dive into what we've set up for it from the Intune front, just to kind of give some context about what we've been talking about. So with regards to the Windows enrollment that you saw there, we've got Windows Hello for Business set up. And it's pointing at all my users. That's the kind of prompting for the pin we saw as part of that particular, logon experience. The deployment profiles, as you would imagine, is something that's quite sort of straightforward. Now, you kind of create the deployment profile once the device ID has been uploaded through the Windows Store for Business service. Again, very straightforward. We won't bore you guys too much with uploading a single CSV file as such. But the settings here are quite important. Now, you would expect, as I sort of said, this will grow. It doesn't look massively impressive for now, but the privacy settings here we've kind of hidden. Now, the end user license agreement is something that this particular person or business user will be accepting on your business behalf. So just make sure you do your reading and do your fact checking as part of this to make sure there are no sort of legal loopholes you might be kind of tripping over more than anything. The end user license agreement, as I said, you can find out more information. There's a link below it. But more importantly here, this is the first time we've ever been able to do this without having a local administrator account on first. We've never been able to kind of make someone just a standard user from a device out of the box effectively without kind of running it through the mill, as I said. So we can provision a standard user as well as a administrative user. Now, be careful, because if you are a global admin within Azure, rules need not apply. All right. So make sure that, you are doing this to give just the right amount of access instead of, not enough, basically. So following on from that, that's where the kind of Windows AutoPilot profile takes its form, takes flight, and then, kind of bounces around, does what it needs to do. The end user logs on. That experience in itself is a very kind of personalized experience. It's something that will kind of increase and get better over time. But you can already see the clear difference between just being presented with something quite blank versus something with regards to kind of getting that end user onboarded pretty quickly as part of this service. So with that in mind, we'll jump back to our PowerPoint. So before we carry on, actually, I'll quickly give that machine a reboot. Now, that is bouncing around in the back. We'll see what that comes back up with. So let's talk about, the sort of next steps here. All right, the sort of whole point of this, it's a case of discussing products. All right, what have people been saying about it? Here's some of the feedback that I've got personally, as well as some bits and pieces online, as well as some sort of the publications, as well as the comments and TechNet more than anything. So as you can see here, the kind of feel and the consensus around this from some people is that it feels very basic. It looks very plain. The sort of branding doesn't look very nice. It doesn't feel too personal. It just feels like I've literally picked up a PC that I've bought from PC World or Currys. Other shops are available. And I've logged on, regardless of what account I used to log on, whether it's my work one or not. For an end user, that's not too impressive. All right. We need to look at how we can kind of make this look and feel a little bit more like this is from my business, all right, or this is from a business supplier that's kind of happening, right? We need to make sure that that look and feel, that adoption is a little bit smoother and give end users, right, that, feel that, this is still a work device, all right? We've not just forgotten about you. You've not just got something plain and something we don't care too much about. We can kind of make this, a very iconic thing. And speaking of icons more than anything, one of my favorite human beings who I kind of recently learnt about is this gentleman, meet Charles O'Rear. And for those of you who don't know him, he's taken one of the most well-known photographs any of us would ever have seen. So I saw this in high school, and this was what I looked at most of the time. It's this picture. Now, this is what I would expect when I walked in, when I turned on my laptop in high school. Basically, I would log on and I predominantly see this. This was the default background that the two IT gurus made us look at all the time. They refused to change it. We couldn't change it. But this in itself, was that kind of guarded expectation of what I wanted to see when I first logged on. All right. So if we hop back to our virtual machine, I've just given it a quick reboot. We'll see what's taking place here. And here we are. So what's happened now is we've rebooted that machine and we've turned it back on. And as you can probably, or for the sort of eagle-eyed amongst you, you probably noticed that that is in its sort of standard Windows background. It's something that's been put there by design. So if we kind of click here, you'll sort of see that we have our logon screen It's asking for a PIN. The reason for that is we use Windows Hello to kind of configure that PIN. But, you know, if I forget that PIN, what's my options here? The same is also true for passwords, by the way. But kind of that end user perspective, it's like, whoopsie daisy, I forgot my PIN. And I think I have actually forgotten the PIN for this. It's not irony. We can go ahead, you know, it's still connected to Azure AD. We can kind of do that beautiful thing of resetting PINs and passwords straight from the logon screen, by the way. So there's no point in calling in, you know, a good time saver, as well as a kind of good way of letting that user become self-sufficient wherever possible, all right? Because typically speaking, this was the big no-no and the sort of big blocker to anything progressing. We would re-reliant on IT basically being able to reset the PIN. What we've done here is we've just kind of given that power back. So password next, and PIN would be reset. Yeah, you'd get a text message in this instance as well. So let's go ahead and actually just quickly log back on. Oh, and by the way, should you go back, I'm not sure if this is a bug or a security feature, it wipes the username entirely. So if I just grab it again, bear with me one moment. And we will type that in, go back, turn that into a @ type in our password, and away we go. So what we would be expecting now is that our policy is taking place. The logon's actually pretty quick, which is nice, always a plus. And there you go. You've got that iconic image we were discussing as part of this you know, presentation. So from a sort of generic look and feel, you can see we've gone away from that, you know, that standard blue image with the standard squares, and we've made it a bit more personal. But that's not where it stopped. I don't know if you remember briefly, I clicked on the start menu. There's some very sort of open and wide generic buttons. What we should have, and this would be really embarrassing if this didn't work, is a custom start menu. There you go. You can see there that we have our applications ready to go. All right, we've got Office installed and we have it looking a bit neater, a bit tidier, right? Gone is much of the sort of noise and nonsense that we typically don't care about. And with mine, by the way, you can't change and reshape these tiles because of the way I've done them. I'll cover this as well as part of this. Some extra bits as well, all right? It's not just stopped there. Custom start screen, big whoop. All right, we can actually customize it a bit more. So for those in front of you looking at this sort of session, you have a start menu at your disposal. If you were to click on your Windows 10 icon, you'd see different options there. All right, all I want the end user to see is I want you to be able to lock it and I want you to be able to sign out. That's it. As well as this, the actual power button. All right, I don't want to give my end users the power to restart the device. I want them to fully shut it down, as well as then it will just be, as you would expect, just start it up. All right, we can put these levels of customization in place. You'll notice as well that Cortana isn't on the taskbar. All right, again, policy that we set. So you can very quickly tell from a user's perspective, all right, what this would look and feel like once I've onboarded, once that reboot has happened and after all my policies and everything has applied. All right, Windows Store for Business, as well as just the store. We can also look at, you know, let's pretend I need something, I require something, you know, where do I go and get it? This in itself will take, as you might expect, a little bit of user training, or just a very good communication plan more than anything to kind of point me in the direction of my applications. But they're here in the actual store. Someone just says default directory. But I can go here, and as you can see there, I have a sub-selection of applications which I can go ahead and consume. All right. Additional policies can be put in place, things like Edge and Internet Explorer, if I need be. So what do these settings look like, right? And how complicated or how straightforward was this? All right. Because all we've done here, we spun up a blank VM, we put a Windows AutoPilot service over the top of it, nothing special happened, and we pushed some applications down. All right, let's take a look and see what that looks like. So here we have Intune once again, and we'll start with the mobile apps, you know, and what they look like. So as you would expect, Office 365 users, very common space, and the applications and everything else that we push down, you know, should also be as easy and straightforward to set up as something like Office 365. So here I've set up an application deployment. I'll show you the properties of this. It's a tick box exercise. You know, it's kind of bringing it back to this is how easy it is to use. There's no real packaging required, right? Those days are gone. Even Configuration Manager these days with Office 365 package. Again, it's a tick box exercise. I wish to have the following applications. All right, I can also include Project and Visio here, by the way, guys. You know, from there, the information I require, as you would expect, you know, we should all be kind of in a position to fill these boxes out. Very generic. We have our logo down here. We have it categorized. All right. This is the productivity. It's data management. It's booked. It's other apps, whatever the case may be. Get into that habit very early on of categorizing these things, right? For a few things, right? For your sanity as well as in analytics later on down the line. All right. App suite settings. Again, very straightforward, very sort of sensible settings here. You know, nothing you would not have seen or encountered before if you've ever deployed Windows. Microsoft Office. None of these settings should come as any sort of type of shock to you. And from there, with regards to, you know, getting this down, you know, it's done on assignments, basically. I actually skipped over that. Let me quickly just hop back. It's done on assignments, right? So I'm not pushing this to this virtual machine or this device, right? It's pushed to users. And the beauty here is, you know, we've got some options. This isn't true for every application, by the way. So be not careful, but just at the very least, bear this in mind. The same is true for Configuration Manager. With regards to pushing these applications, you have to be smart, all right? Because, you know, pushing this or making this available are two different things. We're pushing this down. So that's why it's required. So if I'm in this particular user group, which is all users, and I have a Windows 10 machine and I have enrolled it into Intune, it will force down Office 365 onto my device, all right? I can also make it not applicable. So it will stop it from installing, as well as making it just available where I can go ahead and just choose when to install it. Okay. I can also make the uninstall packages available should I require it to be. So you have some options around, you know, well, standard options anyway, from a basic application deployment consideration there. So now that we've pushed something like Office down, all right, let's look at some of those other settings, those other personalization settings that we were kind of mentioning at the beginning of this presentation. So if we go into our device configuration, go to our profiles, you'll see here we have a number of Windows 10 ones, right? If we just dive into the Windows 10 config settings, all right, these are our standard Windows 10 MDM settings, all right? Dive into the properties of these. Okay, we've got 29 settings. Your naming doesn't have to be as poorly done as mine. But to give you a look and a flavor of what's possible with something like this, especially from a Windows 10 management point of view, all right, you can, as you would expect, the sort of general settings. I've configured 3 of them. As you can see here, we've got some bits and pieces in here that only apply to the mobile platform. So as much as something like Windows 10 is quote unquote an agnostic platform, it doesn't have sort of too many variants per device. It kind of does, but we'll pretend it doesn't for this instance. We can go ahead here, as you can see, make some sort of very standard changes, both to the actual device. As you can see here, we've blocked Cortana, okay, as well as anything application related. You know, we can kind of block bits and pieces with file syncs to, you know, to and from something like OneDrive. All right, password settings. Any guy worth his salt would know these. Again, same rules apply. Default policy, right, for password settings. You can split these up a bit more granularly and better than I have done. Not all these settings need apply. We can also create exclusion groups. And from a personalization perspective, this is that image, all right? So if the internet gods are on my side, I should be able to very quickly portray this. We'll hop onto it here. And there you go. So that's how that image is getting down. That Windows XP image is reaching my device. It's from this particular setting here. It's a chance to get creative. You can go nuts. All right. Putting something there once that end user logs on, or changing it once in a while, you know, gives that refreshing feel of IT is looking at this, right? That look, that aesthetic is something that's becoming more and more and more important, especially with millennials, believe it or not. All right. The devices you hand out, the way things look, the way things feel on the software you give them is something that is critical. So here again is a very good opportunity to be a bit unique, think a little bit outside the box with how you present things, right? So that in itself is the backgrounds, all right? Now, what about those start menu settings, all right? As I said, we have this beautiful start menu, All right, now, as you saw earlier, it was 9 inches wider, had a load of noise in there. How do we get to something like this? How easy is this to kind of get to? All right, again, something that is borrowed predominantly from Windows 10. All right, this custom Windows 10 start screen that we've put together, all right, is something that you would have done probably if you've ever done a Windows 10 rollout. It's just basically capture the start screen config, and it comes down in the form of an XML file. And this is what this looks like. Hopefully the internet gods will speed up. There we go. And if we find the start screen, there we go. Come on. So there you have it there. So I uploaded a very sort of basic XML file, and I used the capture Windows start screen PowerShell script for it. There are other ways of doing this, but typically speaking, this in itself is something that is a traditional way of doing things, right? So you can still leverage anyway existing ideas and customizations that you've already potentially got in place with Windows 10 and expanding them down the cloud route. This is beautiful because this gives you that control around what's on the start menu. What do I want to present? If I have a bunch of end users which need things up and running fairly quickly and I want to make that as simple as possible, let's do it from here. All right. Now these settings cannot change. The end user hasn't got the room here to jig things about. Right. So these aren't like group policy preferences. These are pretty much a hardwired start screen. You can make customization to it sort of as you go, and things will be replicated down, and mine is sort of done on the Office suite and a few browsers. But ultimately speaking, there's lots of flexibility here. All right. On top of that, you don't have to do this. There's also some bits and pieces within here you can customize for your start screen. Won't dive too deep into these now. But it's a case of knowing the options that are available to you. So not every single thing has to happen from group policy. Not every single thing has to be kind of hardwired into the WIM file. We can make things happen and change at a granular level as well as a modular level. Okay. So if we need to make a change, we don't have to recapture the WIM to, kind of make changes here. We can just kind of change our config file. So let's take a step back and look at some of the other settings we've put in place. All right. Again, sort of taking it back to that start menu experience. We don't always have to kind of do things with XML files. We can be a bit more kind of, I suppose, kind of discreet with things. We don't have to disable or hardwire things. We can hide things as well. So in this instance here, you see I've kind of I've hidden the restart button. And the way I've done this sort of through very basic policy CSP. All right. It's things that are native and custom to certain variants of Windows. The latest one I'm working on here is 1709, 1703. This is also possible. But you can already see, and this should be triggering in the backs of your minds, if there's a setting for it, I can either enhance it, turn it off, or kind of revoke permission to it or revoke it entirely. All right. And this is kind of where you do that. This is I would think of this very much as settings being applied from the cloud down is exactly what it is. Now, this doesn't replace group policy, but does it need to? Should it be that group policy has effect or takes effect at any given moment or all of the time? Are other settings just as good as my group policy settings? And in some instances, the answer is yes. Here, as I said, we can kind of be a bit more specific in what we pull down and push down. All right. Again, hide changes to the account. Again, it's also been done from here, straight from policy CSP. So the idea behind this, as I said, is a case of looking at things in a different light, in a different way, from a different angle, so that, we've got our sort of standard, basic MDM policy, very easy tick box exercise config for Windows 10. All right. We can then kind of enhance that further by leveraging some on-premise technology or capturing effectively an XML file, uploading that to the cloud, having that transferred down, right? Something that may or not already exist within your kind of Windows environment. All right, looking at then the sort of policy CSP elements that we can expand this on. And very quickly, you have a fully working PC that's Azure Active Directory joined, has has Microsoft Office installed on it, and looks like a device that came straight out of the IT department. All right, that in itself is something that, you know, we've strived for. And if you do this properly and you test this, all right, something you can have up and running very, very quickly without the need of spinning up VMs and getting MDT servers ready and everything else. All right, you can also leverage your existing hardware. Okay, so looking at it from this side of the fence, from the technical side of the fence, very quickly you can see that we can create something quite special very quickly and do it fast. Because as I said, the main driver here is a case of, you know, we need to reduce complexity to save time. So to bring it back to our device over here, all right, once this device is done, I've decided to leave the organization. Dave's had enough. He's won the lottery. He's off to Marbella for the rest of his days. You know, what do I do with this device? All right. Now, remember, this device hardware ID is registered to me, the business. All right. So if I kind of need to revoke access or do something to it, what options do I have? All right. Can he just run away with it? All right. The answer to that is probably going to be no. So if we look at his device, there we have it. We'll go to all devices. I've just got the one. And as you can see here, I mean, I suppose it's worth a look. This shouldn't be kind of, you know, shock and awe to anyone. You know, we can look at the hardware and get some information from that, by the way. So from that side of things, actually kind of getting some asset information back, you know, from Intune, it's not that bad. You know, it kind of does exactly what it says on the tin. We can also look at the discovered apps. There's some stuff on there. Most of these are, you know, going to be, well, can give false reading, by the way. If you kind of remove an app or hide it, it still picks it up. So you can kind of see that. We've got Zune Video as well as the Xbox app. Although not visible to the end user, it is still, technically speaking, on that device. You'll have to also wait for the syncs and stuff to happen. All right, device compliance is set by compliance policy. We didn't cover that too much. It's just a case of, you know, is something catastrophically wrong, yes or no? But with regards to the properties anyway, you know, you can see here that the device ownership has been set to corporate. You can change this as you should go along. Well, Intune 9 times out of 10 from a BYOD perspective assumes the device is a personal device unless told otherwise. In this instance, we've set this to corporate. Categories, we've got different categories here. For the sake of it, we'll just pick that one. All right, we can go ahead and save that. Okay. So as you can see here, we've got a couple of options at the very top. All right. We can remove the company data. This will go ahead and forcibly remove the Office installation and everything else we kind of deemed as managed applications. We can do a factory reset. All right. Or we can do this. All right. The fresh start experience with Windows 10. All right. This in itself will just remove all the noise, all the gunk. All right, and give us back that experience, that Windows AutoPilot experience. All right, so let's see if we can do this in tandem. This shouldn't take too long. It's fairly quick. All right, and Dave hands his device in. We'll put that over here. I've got another monitor. Oh, it's gone out of whack. We'll leave it here. If we click on the Fresh Start button, you'll see here that cleaning this device, remove all preloaded Win32 apps and update the device for free to the current version of Windows 10. You can choose whether to retain the user's data or not. Okay, so tick this box if Dave, you know, it just needs a rebuild basically. Alternatively, Dave's leaving the organization. We can go there. You know, if we bring it back in quickly, this shouldn't take too long. We've got our message that the Fresh Start's been initiated. Tick tock, tick tock. There you go. So that was in a matter of seconds, basically, that's taken effect. Now, no VPN is in place. Direct access isn't a thing here. We've just basically done that straight through the internet. Now, as you would expect, it's going to go ahead. It's going to cycle that device, remove everything it needs to remove, and then bring us back to where we started, right? So that rebuild's done. There's no more prepping things. There's no more doing anything we shouldn't be doing because Windows is taking care of it all by itself. So if we bring it back to the last couple of slides here and just wrap everything around, I suppose, you know, thinking about things from what we've seen so far and where this kind of fits in, right, is the fact that, as we've already seen there, we can do some password resets straight from the kind of log-on screen, right? A time saver. The setup, incredibly easy. You've still got centralized control, right? Analytics can also feed into this. One of my colleagues, Ken Caban, did a very, very good Windows Analytics kind of webinar. Check that out. But most importantly, you know, we're still kind of very much focused on that personal touch for that end user, right? It's that look and feel. It's that adoption that's going to make the difference these days in actually driving Windows 10 forward, as well as from an IT perspective, a business perspective, and from a usability perspective as well, right? We need to make sure that look, that feel is very clean, especially in the cloud space, right? Very, very important. So when it gets to the food for thought sections here, you know, there's some questions you have to ask yourself as both an IT professional, a leader within the IT game, or someone who's kind of, you know, head up of a department is, you know, with regards to resources, do you have an endless supply of resources? Very few businesses do these days, right? Especially when it comes to IT staff. And when it comes to kind of getting services up and running and ready, right? Is Windows AutoPilot something that can fit into every nook and cranny? Probably not, but can it help in some instances? Potentially. Can I get those end users or business services up and running fairly quickly? You know, yes, I can. And how do I do that? You know, do I have to spend huge amount of time and resources doing that? So I hope we've proved here to some extent that, you know, it is a simple and very straightforward process to get done. All right. So can my things be simplified? The answer is yes, it can. With regards to risk, right? Am I going down this road too soon? Look, you know, things are moving so quickly, you're going to blink and it's going to be out of date. I don't think there's anything you can adopt too soon, especially from a testing perspective or kind of looking at where this can fit into your business, right? I wouldn't crowbar this in. I would look at where this can meet a need. If it can, go ahead and use it. It's there. It's available. All right. With regards to the information around that, any pitfalls, any troubles, you know, there's lots of articles out there at the moment. All right. What others are doing and what others are saying is also something to take into account from a decision-making perspective. Regardless if it meets your needs, what are others in your field or your industry or your sector doing? You know, and where could you kind of look at either learning from that or changing that or even recommending something to obviously towards them. All right. And then finally, it's a case of also keeping one ear to the ground with how Microsoft is doing their best, I would argue, to some extent to make your lives easier. I know it doesn't always feel like that. With something like Windows AutoPilot, I kind of feel it's definitely a step in the right direction. All right. As an IT guy, I can get a Windows 10 device to an end user that looks fancy pretty quickly in a matter of days. And, you know, that's how fast UPS or other service providers are available. You can get a device out to that person. All right, so I think I'll leave it there, basically. Happy to take some questions. And once again, thank you very much for your time.